Hello, Lawrence. Welcome to the channel. Okay, today we're going to be talking about recovery. Okay, now we've all had our fair share of stormy relationships, but I hope you don't mind. I'm going to start this video with a bit of a personal story. About 9 years ago now, I married this girl who was raised in a cult. Okay, and when that whole relationship fell apart, so did I. And afterwards I went on this bender, which is kind of like this spiral of destructive behavior. I was drinking, chasing women, passing out in the back seat of my car. I spent hundreds of euros on bags and coats. I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't even tell what was good for me versus what just felt good at the time. So fast forward to today, and I can see that there really was no silver bullet that could get me from feeling like that to, where I am now. And if I woke up tomorrow in the same situation, there would be a series of things that I would do that would be non-negotiable for me. And in this video, I'm going to go through those. But first, I just wanted to touch off on why this video is going to be relevant for you. Why should you watch to the end of this video? Okay, what are you going to get out of it? There's no point in you watching this video if you're in a healthy and secure relationship, okay? This video is not going to be for you. But then there are those people whose last relationship left them feeling like they've been walking on eggshells. They felt pretty hopeless about being able to change anything and ultimately confused about how much of that relationship was real at all. Those sorts of people, if they don't do these things, then they risk delaying their recovery and some potentially never recover at all. So if you're researching narcissism and your family and friends have been pushed to arm's length and your hobbies are in some cupboard gathering dust, then stick around. This video is going to be for you. All right, so let's get into some of these things then. So first thing to understand is that narcissistic abuse happens when you spend any degree of time or proximity to a narcissist, to somebody who's going to use subconscious manipulation in order to get you to do what they need at your expense, okay? They're kind of like nukes, if you think of it like that. Imagine that you're standing in Chernobyl and the power station is completely melted down. The closer you are to ground zero, the more radiation you're going to take on. But in the same sense, the longer you spend in the fallout zone, that's going to have a bad effect too, okay? So the first thing that I would do is to remove myself from that environment completely. You can't think about purging yourself of all of this radiation, this toxic buildup, if you're still there, if you're still in the fallout zone. And if it's not safe to do, I'd have to plan out a strategy to do it safely, because narcissists are not going to respond to that kindly. By removing yourself from the environment, by detaching yourself from them, you're threatening the very way in which they've learned to survive. So I'd put a safety plan in place if I needed to, and then I would just separate from them, go zero contact, no texts, no calls, no emails at all. It's the hard part, if we all admit it, because the hardest part really is trying to distance from them emotionally. And that becomes considerably easier when you distance from them physically first. Now, if I couldn't do that, if I couldn't completely separate from them, there's this thing called the grey rock method, where essentially you become as uninteresting as a grey rock. I would look to put as much space between me and them as possible, and then just become so boring that they just don't pay me any attention. Second thing I would do is look to reduce the impact of any interactions that I did have with them. Some of those interactions can cause you to be pushed into fight or flight mode. This feeling that there's a threat, that there's a danger, okay? There isn't, but it can feel like this overwhelming sense of fear, guilt, or shame. And when you're in this state, it makes you highly susceptible to influence and much more likely that you're just going to fall back under their thumb. It's impossible to you to recover if you're constantly hooked back in. If you imagine a soldier coming back from a war and then hearing a balloon pop or a car backfire, it might be enough to make him relive some of the horrifying experiences that he's had. It's a similar kind of thing when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, but it's not just one event. It could be a number of events over a long period of time, sometimes several events a day. It's going to be very, very difficult to pinpoint a specific event. And so these what are called emotional flashbacks are going to happen much less like a visualization and more like this overwhelming feeling of guilt, overwhelming feelings of shame or fear. They're going to strike most likely when you have interactions with the person. So you have to interrupt these patterns and come to a point where you realize that there is no threat, that you are not your emotions. And there's this really good exercise in this book here, actually. It's Richard Grannon's A Cult of One. And it's a pattern interrupt where you count down on your fingers. Each finger represents a specific pattern interruption. And what it does is it grounds yourself in reality whenever one of these emotional flashbacks is triggered. I wish I had read this book much sooner than I did, but if you're going through this, then it's absolutely something I recommend doing. Third non-negotiable for me would be to put in place a very rigid structure of living for at least the first 10 weeks after the relationship collapsed. And the reason that I would do this in hindsight is to prevent myself from spiraling out of control and doing all these things that feel great but are actually very detrimental. When you're in the relationship with the narcissist, it's chaos. You don't know whether there's going to be a calm, relaxing, enjoyable day, or whether there's going to be something happen that's going to throw you into this emotional turmoil, and you're going to be arguing until 2 o'clock in the morning and sleeping on the sofa for the next 2 days. You don't know that. So you're anticipating danger around every single corner. It's chaotic, and as a result, you don't eat right, you don't sleep right, you don't get time for the gym, you don't get time to look after yourself at all. You're just in this binary mode of thinking where you're either trying to calm them down or you're trying to stop them from freaking out. And when you come out of the relationship, it feels weird not to do that. And anything that's going to trigger this fight or flight mode is going to prevent you from working through some of the other non-negotiables I'll get onto in a second. So schedule when you sleep, schedule when you eat meals, schedule when you go to work, when you call your mum, when you go to the gym. Create this structure of living that is predictable and reliable. Because if you can't create this safe environment, you're not ever going to get into a mode where you can reprocess and think about and work through what has happened to you in the relationship. And that's why some of the first two things are so important. If you can separate yourself from them, then you can reduce the amount of impact that you have with them. This highly structured living provides you with a safe environment to work through the next things. Such as this fourth non-negotiable that I've come to call unpacking the narrative. Every toxic relationship has this thing called a shared fantasy. It's actually pretty normal in any relationship to have this shared view of the world, these shared goals and dreams. But when it comes to toxic relationships, it's that on steroids, and it's all geared towards them. It's not this mutual thing. It's this one-way relationship, a master and slave dynamic. So within this safe environment that you create, you then have this challenge of working through how much of this relationship was a lie and how much of it was real. Because until you learn to separate yourself from this role or character that you played in their fantasy, then you'll continue to struggle to know the difference between what is real and what isn't. And how can you live a good life like that? I'm going to talk about this sort of concept a lot more on this channel, so if this stuff is clicking with you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss other videos like this. Now, the fifth non-negotiable for me would be to turn down the noise in my head. A lot of people that I've talked to think that when you come out of a toxic relationship, it's done. You're free, like, okay, it's over now, and then you can just kind of reassimilate back into normal living, and you go back to your old self, and then life sort of resumes. Nah, it's not like that. Like, you leave that relationship with a whole bunch of internalized ideas about yourself, about them, about your relationship, about what a good relationship is, about the world and how you look at it. And these ideas are going to continually influence how you think, how you feel, and ultimately what you do as well. Now, you've probably heard of an inner critic before, and that's exactly what this is like. It's like you're hearing their words, but in your voice. It sounds like you, but the ideas, they came from the relationship. They came from them. And should I have to go through this again, I would certainly hire a professional coach or a therapist to help me through this. But it would be a non-negotiable for me to recognize and interrupt that noise. And one of the questions that I've learned works quite well for this is, whose voice is that? Every time you get one of these feelings that I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, there's no point in doing this, nobody's going to like it anyway, think, whose voice is that? Because it's not me. It's something else. Where have I got that idea from? So the last one is probably the most important, and I kind of figured this out by accident, but you have to rebuild your value system. When you're in Chernobyl and you're taking on all of that radiation, it's a bit dark, but part of your personality dies, okay? There's part of you which shrivels up like a leaf and drops off the plant. And you have to put work in to reinvent this Mark II version of you. The way we're brought up is to identify with beliefs. I believe this, therefore I am that. But the problem with beliefs is that they're easily changeable. Someone needs only control what information you can and can't have access to in order to change your belief. And if they change your belief and you identify with it, then they change your very sense of who you are. So instead, the way I see it is you build a sense of self based off of a much broader concept, a value. That is a lot harder to manipulate. So I developed this little exercise for myself that helps you identify and distill things down into a core value system, and then emotionally attach to that value system in order to create this new moral identity. And from that comes a moral compass, and from that comes boundaries. I'm going to create another video where I just walk through that process. I'll probably get a whiteboard and just go through it with you. So if you found this helpful, hit the like button. And if you want to check that video out later, just go ahead and click subscribe. Okay, look after yourself out there, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.